Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at an AK-12. Now, this is the first original adopted version of the AK-12. I actually have a video that I just published recently on the second version, the updated and improved AK-12, and that video goes through the developmental history of the AK-12 as a general platform. So I'm not going to repeat all of that here. I would direct you to that video. If you haven't seen it, I'd say go check that video out, then come back here and finish this one. I have a link to it down in the description text. At any rate, this is the first original version. So this was formally adopted by the Russian Federation in December of 2017. Put into production, the initial order was 150,000 guns that were supposed to be delivered by 2022, which probably were. Then once they started getting a little bit of experience with the system, they decided to make a number of improvements and upgrades to the gun, which again, we have in the previous video. But today I want to go through and take a look at the features that are unique to the original early version of the AK-12. So this particular one came off a battlefield in Ukraine. This is part of what's actually in service in Ukraine right now, including, interestingly, 545 Magpul AK mags. That's what this gun actually came off the field with. So let's dive in and take a closer look at the features of the original AK-12. All right, so here's the whole thing. The mechanical core of this rifle is basically an AK-74. Essentially, this was developed off the AK-103 system, which is the sort of modernized 545 AK-74. They have added a 2-round burst mechanism to the fire control group, but other than that, the receiver is basically the same as a 74. So these use all standard 545 AK mags, which they actually developed a new Russian magazine that has some visible witness holes in it to tell you how much ammo you have, but the Russians in Ukraine are using anything and everything that they can get their hands on, and that actually includes a fair amount of Western gear like Magpul mags. If we take a look at the markings here, the Russian designation for this is 6P70, and that doesn't change with the updated version. You may recall on the previous gun, it was still 6P70, caliber 545 by 39. Here we have the arsenal production mark and serial number. I think the most significant difference between this and the later updated version is the rear sight. This is essentially an RPK rear sight leaf, but using an aperture. There you go, using an aperture instead of an open notch. And of course, it's been mounted all the way back here on the dust cover. Interesting to note that this is actually marked 545, and they did make versions of this rifle in, well, they made one in 556 as an export gun, and in theory, they also have adopted this in 762, although I don't think those ever really went into production, in part because of the war in Ukraine. They needed more standard infantry rifles, and so any plans to adopt a different version for specialty use in 762 kind of went out the window. At any rate, we have an adjustable BDC here out to 800 meters. This is your windage adjustment, just like on an RPK. Open that up and rotate it to slide the aperture left and right. The front sight is still a very standard AK round post there, threaded in and out for elevation adjustment. This is not quite a Picatinny rail, but close. Now let's go to the back end of the gun and work our way forward with the other features here. So the buttstock on this is basically a copy of a Magpul CTR buttstock, but these aren't Magpul. These are made in Russia for the AK-12. It is 4-position adjustable, and it's actually marked on the top there what position you're in. And you can see here, this is also a side folding stock. So if we push that in, we can fold the stock over. There is no latch at the front here. However, the hinge mechanism locks this in the folded position, and in order to open the stock back up, you have to come back here to the inside of the hinge, push this spring-loaded lever down, and then the stock can open back up and lock in place. The AK-12 got a new pistol grip, stylistically different from the original pistol grip. but I mean, it's a pistol grip. There are buttons on both sides here. If I push both of those in, I can pop this out. So inside here, we have space for storage of some cleaning supplies as well as a pin punch to assist in disassembly. It is interesting to note that this rifle is not set up to actually have a cleaning rod. There's a hole in the bayonet lug here that you would expect to be for a cleaning rod. However, we still also have a bayonet lug back here on the gas block. There's no hole drilled in it. There's no space for a cleaning rod back here. That's potentially a serious problem. Ammunition, the new production ammunition is non-corrosive, but Russia has, or at least had when the Ukraine war started, massive stockpiles of surplus 5.45 ammunition, or leftover supplies of 5.45 ammo that was all old enough that it was corrosive. So you would definitely want to be cleaning this rifle, and that's a little hard to do without having a cleaning rod. Now, the pistol grip and the stock are two elements that did change on the second pattern rifle, so you can see those changes in the other video. Of course, we have the new rear aperture sight on a reinforced dust cover. We'll pull this off in a moment, but first we'll finish the external features. They went ahead and basically adopted what I think was developed originally in the US as a commercial improvement, this big extra finger ledge on the safety, so that as a right-handed shooter, this thing's really tight, you can have a firing grip here and bring your finger up onto the safety lever and drop it down while theoretically maintaining a firing grip. There are also now 4 positions to the safety. So this is semi-auto all the way down coming off the bottom of the rifle. Then, well, there it is clipped in. It'll go a little farther if you're over exuberant on the lever. Next up, right there, we have a 2-round burst mechanism. 1 notch above that is full auto, unlimited full auto, and of course then the safe position. The handguard is polymer. There is a heat shield in there. I'll take that apart in a moment to show you. The upper handguard does not have any sort of heat shield insert. It's just plain polymer. We have a combination gas block and front sight block now, and a removable gas plug here because the gas tube is no longer a removable element. So if you want to be able to clean the gas tube, you need to be able to open the front and the back of it, and that's why there is a detachable or removable gas plug. This does not have multiple gas settings, just a single one. And then, of course, the new flash hider slash muzzle brake. You can see a couple of holes in here. We have a blast chamber here, a few little flash hider prongs on the front, and a single chamber on the front of the brake. Now, normally you would use the pin tool included in the pistol grip for several elements of this disassembly. Because this doesn't have it, actually it's a Glock tool that I have instead. So there's a spring-loaded detent right here, and if I push that in, I can then rotate the muzzle brake 180 degrees to pull it off. So there's the inside of the blast chamber. This is what the outside of the muzzle actually looks like. There's a similar spring-loaded plunger right here. If I push that in, I can then, there we go, rotate this guy 90 degrees, pull it out. There's your one gas port. This thing is massively oversized. And there we go. I can just barely show you, get an angle there to show you the actual gas port coming out of the barrel, which is also pretty big. I have to assume this is a fairly heavily overgassed, designed to ensure reliability in really bad conditions. All right, next up, let's go ahead and take off the dust cover. They have redesigned the dust cover so that it is actually solid as a reliable mounting point, a repeatable mounting point for the rear iron sight, as well as potentially for optics up here. And I think they actually did a pretty good job of designing this improvement to give a solid mount without having to substantially redesign the receiver of the gun. So they have, of course, removed the rear sight here. We don't have a rear sight block because the rear sight's now back here. Instead, we have this cross pin lever. So if I lift that up 90 degrees and then pull it out, that unlocks the front of the dust cover, and I then just pull it backwards. There we go. That's going to come off the back of the receiver. What we have here is a crossbar in the top cover that connects to these little reinforcing plates. There's a flat spring behind it, and this is actually sitting in an oblong hole. So it can push backwards. That allows this spring to push it forward and always put positive tension on it so that it doesn't come loose. In theory, if you put a lot of wear on this, you might actually change the position of the dust cover, and you might have to adjust the sight at some point, but this means it should always return to that same zero. So it's never going to wobble. You know, over time you may have to adjust the zero as the gun wears, but you don't have to worry about the zero shifting dramatically just because you took the dust cover off and put it back on. Anyway, that bar locks into these two hooks that are part and parcel of the rear trunnion on the gun there. The recoil spring is basically the same design as traditional classic AK, just with a different locking mechanism here because it no longer protrudes out the back of the dust cover. So to take this off, we're going to rotate it up, and then I can lift it out. Really basic AK recoil spring there. The fire control mechanism is more complex than normal because it's got a 2-round burst built in. And by the way, that is a 2-round burst that automatically resets when you release the trigger. So if you're in 2-round burst and you just give it a quick tap, you'll fire 1 round, and when you release the trigger, it resets. So the next burst that you fire will also be 2 rounds. Bolt carrier, gas piston, bolt. As far as I can tell, these are essentially identical to the original AK-74. So we can take the bolt out here. That's what you've got right there. And same with the bolt carrier, basically identical to the AK-74. No reason, you know, the caliber stayed the same, the receiver stays the same. There's no reason to try and like rebalance the harmonics, the dynamic elements of the action. All right, and that leads us to just the handguard to remove. We have a cross pin here that locks the lower handguard in place, and this little tiny hole here, which connects to a flat spring. So to take the handguard off, I push a punch in here, and that allows me to press this pin out. That comes out, and then we can pull the handguard. Come on. There we go. The handguard comes forward. These two pieces are just held together by interlocking rails, so separate it like that. Lower handguard comes off. We've got a little heat shield in there. This is the flat spring that this pin sits underneath. It is interesting to note that on this, the first version of the gun, that's sort of a shaped, you know, they've got this round shape to that flat spring. So you push it up here to allow that pin to come in and out. On the later iteration of the gun, the 2019 upgrade, this actually becomes just a plain flat piece of spring steel that's actually a little more obnoxious to work with. So I was surprised to see that change. This seems like the better system than the earlier one, although it may be a more expensive version to manufacture, and maybe that's why they changed it. Lastly, we have the upper handguard, which is just held in place by tension. It's a single piece of plastic, and see if we can get it here. There we go. We can pop that off. That's all you got there. Very simple. And that leaves you with your permanently affixed gas tube. Now that you have the gas plug out, you have a clear line of sight. Maybe not quite through the camera, but yeah, you have a clear line of sight through the gas tube. You can run a bore brush through there to clean out any corrosive residue. All right, so there is the original iteration of the Russian AK-12, all field stripped apart for you. I'm gonna go ahead and put this back together, and then we're gonna head over to the range and do a little bit of shooting with it to see how it handles. I suspect it'll shoot a lot like an AK-74, but AK-74s are really quite pleasant to shoot. So let's see, I have this in, we're gonna click this all the way down to semi-auto mode to start with. that is in fact quite nice and pleasant to shoot. So now let's try two-shot mode. See, that's full. That should be two-shot burst.